What if you wanted to build a base, but the briefing rate wouldn't even matter to you? Well, that's exactly what the Fbase group is now. The group dedicated to building spawn bases all across Constantiam's greater spawn region. Prepare yourself as I tell you the story of all 8 Fornicabases from the perspective of Fornicator, myself, Nhia, and iFukit. The story begins back in August of 2021. After a month of my Constantiam series that I used to record on the server, I got the idea to make a spawn base with friends, in which I would be able to record. I shared the idea with Fornicator, who went through with the idea. After all, it was just meant to be fun and a way to kill time. We made our way back to spawn and chose a location for the first Fbase. That's when another member we brought on board. His name was Mr. Lotus, a new player who had just started out on the server and found a nice forested area with a hill on it. At first I was pretty skeptical about this player, as I had never heard of him before. We geared him up with a few kits and started to build at the location that he was at. Fornicator also began to invite other players over to build and have some fun while he recorded all of the building process. But only in 3 days, the base was nuked due to the third founder, Mr. Lotus, who was threatening us to leak the coordinates after some childish drama. We took the matter into our own hands and grieved the spawn base by ourselves. Mr. Lotus would be kicked out of the group after this incident and would never get back in. But just 3 days later we would begin working on Fbase 2. Making our way from the site of the first Fbase, we stumbled upon a mountains biome, where we would lay our next work. I would still continue recording at this one also, just like at the first Fbase. Lots of fun and good times were had there in the 2 weeks of its lifespan. Players were running around and some were helping me to build. Fbase 2 had in total over 20 members present just in the Discord server alone. Of course, having this many people, which majority of them were new players who were looking for clout, of course was going to cause some drama. In the base's last days, all of the PvPers were suddenly kicked out of the base, except one. His name was Vank. This player, who had joined only a month before the first Fbase, would end up leaking the coordinates to the 2B2D griefer full screen. Later that night, they would roll up to the base and full screen began to grieve. But the remaining players that were still at the base while it was being grieved hunted full screen down and we ended up killing him, sending him back to spawn. From this point on, Fornicator decided to head on with the spawn bases and make more and more and more, just for fun. He never expected them to become a small meme of crab shacks that lasted a couple of days max on the server. However, when it came to me, I stopped building at Fbases after a second one, and had moved on over to continue building at my own base in the server. Fbase V2.5 would be started a little bit later on, and griefed by Geza 3D right away. In October of 2021, Fbase 3 would be started after a little bit of inactivity and tons of new faces would be brought on board, with some of the most recognizable ones being iFukit and Misakami. They ended up working on it for 3 days after Nhia had asked Fornicator if she could invite Ian to the base, a member of a group nicknamed Pogdog. Forn would agree on inviting him over if Nhia had trusted Ian. Now, according to Nhia, she didn't even send Ian the cords to the base, as somehow he already had them and was on his way to grieve it. This caused Fornicator to think that Nhia had done this on purpose, and he kicked her from the base. Later on that day, Fbase V3 was grieved. From this point on, more members would be brought on board and more would be kicked out of the base. Not long after, Fbase 4 would begin to be built. But again, a couple of days later, Starbot came to attack. When this happened, I was online and fighting him at the base. Eventually he would end up running away with Botefly and never returning. This also caused Starbot to get kicked out of Fbase. Now this is where it gets controversial. iFukit, a known builder in the Constantiam community, was working on her own base with some other players nicknamed Redacted. One of the members of Redacted, Misakami, had asked iFukit to invite Fornicator over, which iFukit agreed on at first, but when she made up her mind again and didn't want Fornicator to be invited, Misa had already sent Foehn the coordinates to Redacted. Fornicator would end up making a big logo that spelled out Fbase V5, and would also make a Reddit post on the server's Reddit claiming the ownership of this so-called Fbase 5, whilst also leaking the natural terrain of Redacted, which meant that anybody could have gotten the coordinates to Redacted. This event that happened wasn't received as a joke in the community, but it made people frown upon Fbases even more. After this, Fbases had died out, and the long hiatus began. Fbase 6 would be started with the theme of a popular phone game nicknamed Clash of Clans, and would be griefed not long after by an unknown griefer. Fbase 7's location would be chosen, some materials were brought in, and not much was built there. Now you would think that the story ends there. Well, you'd be wrong. As of right now, Fbase V8 is still out there somewhere, and it makes it the first Fbase to last more than a couple of days or weeks, and also being somewhat decent and nice looking. There has been only one player that has found it as of right now. It's kind of ironic. A group that was dedicated to creating Spawnbases for fun had turned into being one of the most memed and frowned groups on the server. But that's how it is. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. See ya.